The night truth refused to hide. When silence became louder than music. Los Angeles was supposed to be asleep, yet that night refused to fade. Dodger Stadium, even with its lights dimmed, still pulsed like a giant heart that would not stop beating. The empty seats, the grass returned to silence, the cold air, everything seemed to hold a secret it dared not speak. Because in the middle of that hushed stage, a sentence had been thrown into the world. A sentence without letters. A note without music. A smile without words. Jungkook spoke. And Taehyung answered, with a silence sharper than 1,000 screams. From that night on, the world shifted. Cameras stopped. Live streams vanished. Jungkook seemed to swallow himself whole, disappearing from screens, disappearing from the noise. And Taehyung, his smile became a ghost, appearing only in memory, no longer on the glass of a screen. Yet it was that silence that made the echoes louder. Because ARMY had already seen. Because the world already knew. That night did not die in Los Angeles. It bled into Tokyo, Seoul, New York, into every city with a screen, into every heart brave enough to wait. Prayers were written in comment sections, tears fell in front of phone screens, theories were spun across forums. Then a blurry recording surfaced. An empty road. A cold night. A shaky phone camera. A man in a black jacket walking fast. His face briefly caught in the glow of a streetlight. Jungkook. And beside him, Taehyung. Just a few seconds. But enough to shake the world. Hashtag after Dodger. Hashtag Taekook together. Hashtag Truth Lives. International media erupted. CNN asked, what really happened in LA? BBC wrote, just friendship? Or something more? Korean newspapers fought for the front page. But ARMY needed no clarification. They already knew. They wrote only 3 sentences. Let them be free. Let them exist. Let them breathe. Behind Seoul's glass towers, however, HYBE panicked. Sponsors wavered. Investors grew restless. A leaked email surfaced, cold as steel. If this narrative continues, we will reconsider our partnership. But the more they pressed, the louder the echoes grew. Because truth, once spoken, cannot be caged again. Then came the rumor. That at Dodger, before the stage opened, Jungkook and Taehyung recorded something. A demo. A song. The internet burned. Was it real? A love wrapped in melody? Or just gossip born from longing? No answers came, until a billboard in Tokyo suddenly lit up. Black background. 2 white words. Stay awake. 3 nights later, a file leaked. Low quality, cracked, raw but real. Jungkook's voice unfiltered like a wound still open. I tried to sleep, but the truth kept me awake. Then another voice entered, deep, warm, heavy as an anchor, Taehyung. If loving you is a crime, then let the world be guilty with me. Only 2 lines. But enough to bring the internet crashing down. The file disappeared within minutes. The account that shared it vanished. But it was too late, the song was already carved into millions of ears. They named it, Stay Awake. Not just a title, but a manifesto. Seoul ignited. A billboard in Hongdae displayed another line. Stay awake. Stay alive. Crowds froze. Phones lifted. Tears fell. Because they knew they were living inside history. In a hotel room wrapped in heavy curtains, Jungkook scrolled silently through his phone. He saw the videos, the chants, the prayers. And when Taehyung walked in with a hood pulled low, the world outside suddenly felt far away. No words. No sound. But none were needed. Because their voices were already out there, transformed into the heartbeat of millions. Stay Awake was not just a leak. It was a pulse. It was defiance. It was love refusing to die in silence. Dodger was the spark. Stay Awake was the flame. And everyone knew, what comes next would no longer be just a story. What comes next would be a revolution. The fire that refused to hide. When love became louder than silence. Tokyo's night had not yet ended when the words Stay Awake still flickered on a massive black screen. But the world already knew, what was coming next would not stop at 2 sentences or a leaked demo. Because truth, once breathed into existence, will always find its way, like fire that cannot be locked inside a bottle. And that fire began to spread. In New York, Times Square lit up again. This time it wasn't Jungkook's face. Not Taehyung's either. Not even a cryptic phrase. Instead, it was a fragment of sound, just a few seconds, recorded from a crowd. A single piano note. A trembling voice, almost a whisper. "We are not afraid anymore." Then the screen went black. But it was enough. Because the world recognized that voice. It was the same voice that once set Los Angeles ablaze, the same one that echoed in the Stay Awake demo. HYBE held endless meetings. Sponsors threatened. The stock market dipped. Reporters swarmed every airport gate, every hotel lobby, every street in Seoul where those two names might appear. But the problem was no longer about control. The world had already shifted. It was no longer fans searching for them. It was the world waiting for them. In forums, ARMY no longer wrote theories. They wrote manifestos. If their love is called a sin, let the world learn from that sin. If this is a revolution, then we have already chosen a side. There is no turning back. Dodger was the beginning, Stay Awake was the promise, and we are all witnesses. And then, something happened that left the entire industry speechless. A leaked video. Dark, blurry, filmed with a hidden camera. 2 wooden chairs. 2 silhouettes sitting side by side. The sound of an acoustic guitar. Jungkook began to sing. Taehyung followed, their voices intertwining, like 2 lines refusing to walk alone. The song had never been heard before, not even a title attached. But its lyrics struck the world like a meteor. They told us to be shadows. But shadows can burn too. They told us to hide. But we learned how to sing in the dark. Within minutes, the video was gone. The account that uploaded it vanished. HYBE remained silent. The media stumbled. But ARMY had already given it a name. The Fire. If Stay Awake was a prayer, then the fire was defiance. In Seoul, another billboard came alive. This time, not cryptic words. Not just an instruction to wait. But a full sentence blazing across the skyline. The fire lives where love refuses to die. Crowds froze. Some cried. Some screamed. Others simply stood still, realizing they were watching history being written right before their eyes. And in a quiet hotel room far from the world's gaze, Jungkook sat on the floor, a guitar resting on his lap. Taehyung sat beside him, his head leaning against the wall, eyes on the ceiling as if searching for answers. No cameras. No stage lights. Just 2 breaths, 2 heartbeats, 2 souls finally daring to sing without the whispers of an industry. "Are we ready?" Jungkook asked, his voice breaking. Taehyung turned to him, a faint smile crossing his lips, and answered. "We don't need to be ready. Fire doesn't wait for permission to burn." And the moment those words were spoken, the world understood, this was no longer a rumor. Not just another leak. Not just fandom imagination. This was truth refusing to fade. This was fire refusing to die. Dodger was the spark. Stay Awake was the ember. The fire was the blaze that could no longer be stopped. And everyone knew, what came next wasn't just another chapter. What came next would be an explosion. The confession. When silence finally found its voice. The fire had already spread. From Dodger to Tokyo, from Seoul to New York, from tiny screens to the hearts of millions. The world was already burning, and everyone knew, the only way forward was no longer silence. It was to speak. And finally it happened. Seoul, just before dawn. A live stream appeared without warning. No opening music, no polished filters, no glamorous background. Just a plain room, the glow of a desk lamp, and one man sitting in front of the camera. Jungkook. His eyes were tired, his voice hoarse but raw and honest. "I've tried to hide. I've tried to stay silent. But that night at Dodger, I wasn't just singing. I said something. And I think you all heard it." He paused. His breath trembled. Then another presence entered the frame. Taehyung. He sat beside Jungkook without an introduction, offering only a faint smile, the same smile that once shook the world in Los Angeles. "I'm not good with words," he said softly. "But if that night was a confession, then tonight is my answer." No script. No strategy. No company behind the words. Just 2 hearts, 2 voices, 2 human beings who finally chose truth. And behind the screen, millions of ARMY cried. Not out of shock, but out of relief. No more guessing. No more waiting for cryptic signs. They finally heard the truth from the lips that owned it. The international media exploded. CNN wrote, "The confession that shook the music industry." BBC called it. The night idols became human. Korean newspapers ran out of headlines. For how do you name something greater than scandal, greater than love, greater than music itself? But for ARMY, the answer was simple. They weren't just singing. They weren't just confessing. They were choosing to live. And in that hotel room that had just become part of history, Jungkook and Taehyung looked at each other after the live stream ended. No applause, no stage lights. Just a soft silence, finally, a silence that felt light. Is the world ready? Jungkook asked again. Taehyung smiled, this time wider. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we are. From that night onward, the world was never the same. Dodger was the beginning. Stay awake was the promise. The fire was the rebellion. And the confession was the truth that could never be taken back. Because when two hearts dare to speak, even the largest world must listen. And that is the newest chapter in a story that has shaken the world. From Dodger to Stay Awake to the fire and now, the confession. But remember, this is not the end. Their story continues to unfold, and we are all witnesses to it. See you in the next video. Stay with us because this fire has only just begun.